Cheryl Lampard here. We're coming in a little bit early. I'm just keeping an eye on the clock. I know it takes a while sometimes to get into Facebook Live, so I'm just keeping tabs on the time. I hope you've had a great week and I hope you're all well. And 7 o'clock, here we are. So, hi, welcome indeed to Knitter Matters. This is Season 2, Episode 11. And whether you're a regular viewer or watching for the first time, welcome indeed. It's a pleasure to have you. My name is Cheryl Lampard and I'm an image consultant with my company Star Matters International. And throughout my life I've had two passions really, which have been sewing and knitting. And in particular, knitting is the thing that's my relaxation, it's my therapy. And I know it is for many of you too. I also used to be the owner of a wonderful yarn store in Brighton, England called Yomo. And one of the great joys of having a yarn store is that you get to teach people how to knit. And it's a great pleasure to be doing the same thing all these years later, albeit via a different platform. So for the last few weeks I've been doing this Facebook Live here in beautiful Warwick in New York, and I'm really enjoying the spring weather. We don't get the change of seasons quite the same way as we in Naples, Florida, where my studio is, as we do here, so I'm really enjoying seeing the trees come out into bud. So anyway, last week's episode was all about thumb gussets, and if I could ask the camera just to come to the worktop. We actually did thumb gussets, and you'll see that I've got a better size mitten this time, a fingerless mitt. I had almost like the giant's mitt last week, so I've got a smaller one. And one of the things I said about that is that in the thumb gussets, and you won't see them now because I fixed them, but I'm going to show you how to do that. One of the things that you can't help having are holes where there's a separation from the thumb gusset from the main body of the mitt. So, and I said last week that I would show you a tip for avoiding those holes. It's the nature of the beast. It's the nature of that technique. So you can't really avoid it, but you can't stop it entirely. But I've got a wonderful tip that I'm going to show you in a minute to avoid those holes. So it occurred to me that there's other reasons that we get holes in knitting. So it made sense for that to be the topic for this episode, and to give you fixes for what might seem knitting disasters, but they really aren't. So let me just start with typical reasons that we might have a hole. We might have done an accidental yarn over by putting the yarn over the top and then carrying on knitting and not realizing that happens. Or we may have created, so there would be your hole from an accidental yarn over. You might have been doing eyelets, yarn overs for an eyelet pattern and put it in the wrong place. That happens sometimes. You might have just picked up this strand lying between the stitches. That happens too. Maybe you thought you were going to do a make one where you'd put it on the needle and knit into the back and then didn't, so it's on your needle and you've knitted it. Or maybe you just caught that up in some of your knitting and not realised it. It happens. So we're going to cover all those things. In fact, I'll leave that like that on the needle because we're coming back to that. So back to this finish mitt, where the nature of the technique, as I said, is that at this point you get holes. And I'm going to show you with a sample how we can avoid that. So I'm just going to switch that for that, and I'll come back to that in a minute. I just need to move my chair a minute. Okay. So I'm at the point here. I've done up to what would be a thumb gusset. I've done a thumb gusset here, and I've done this on the flat again, so that it's not so many needles going on. And we did this last week, which was episode 10 of season 2. So I showed you all of that last week. So I just really want to go over how you avoid those holes. So this is at the point where we're going to put the thumb gusset stitches onto waste yarn with a tapestry needle, exactly as we did last week. So you can refer to that if you need to. But here's what makes the difference. This is the first point of what makes the difference. So I've got my stitches between my stitch markers. I'm just going to remove that. I don't need that for the minute. So the first thing I'm going to do, I've got my tapestry needle. I've actually got a slightly finer yarn. I find that a bit easier. I'm going to pick this strand up that's lying between the stitch that was before my marker and the stitch that's after my marker. So I'm going to just pick that up. That's going onto my tapestry needle. Now I'm going along here. This is exactly what we did last week, except we've got the addition of picking up that strand on the tapestry needle. This is putting the thumb gusset onto waste yarn so that we can start dealing with these items separately. Now I'm at the end of that, and I'm going to lose that stitch marker, and I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to pick that strand up there. It's that gap, or rather that ladder, if you will, that strand that's between the last gusset stitch and the main part of what would be the hand. So I'm going to pick that up. I'm going to fasten that off, okay, and I'm going to tie that fairly tightly. I'm going to be undoing it again in a minute, but I just want to show you. So that would be where last week that's the thumb stitches, okay, nicely held securely on a piece of waste yarn that we come back to. Okay, then you'd go back to the hand and finish that off. And I forgot to say that last week, and I'm sorry about that. But what you would do there is exactly as we did. We close that gap there. We cast on 4 stitches and close that gap. And then you would finish knitting your glove, your mitten, and you're probably going to be doing that in the round. Now, I'm not going to show you that bit as we did that last week, but let's imagine we've done that and we're going back to our thumb, okay? So just imagine that the rest of the hand is done, because this is the really important bit. This is the second part of what makes this important. So I'm going to, okay, let me get this. Now yours would be on the round. I'm doing this in the flat just to show you. So now I'm going to pick my stitches back up off the waste yarn. Again, that's what we did last week, except I've got that stitch there before. So that was the stitch. That's not a stitch. It's that ladder, that stitch, the ladder rung, if you like, between the stitch on my right needle and the first of the gusset stitches. So I'm going to pop those back on. And I always think it's better to get them back on the needle first and then cut the yarn. You don't want these to be running away with you. So just pick them all up. Takes a moment. Pick them all up. That's the last stitch. And now I want to make sure that I grab that, again, that last rung, that last ladder rung. And I'm going to put that on my needle. Okay, now I can safely cut my waste yarn. So the only difference between what we're doing here, but it's a very important difference, and what we did last week, is that we've picked up those rungs, and those are going to be important. Okay, so let's imagine, you've got to imagine that we've done the hand, now we're knitting in the round again. Just imagine that. Doesn't matter that we're not doing that. I want to show you what happens. So I'm going to just cut that, because I would rejoin that, obviously, to start knitting. So this is our picked up stitch. We want to make sure that gets twisted. It doesn't matter which way you twist it, but already you're closing up that hole. So you're going to knit that stitch and the one right to the side of it, the one to the left of it, together. You're going to knit those two together, and you might have to squeeze your needle in, as I have done there. And it's meant to be snug. Whoops, split the yarn. Let's have another go. Okay, there we go. Then we would knit to the end of the gusset stitches. Coming up to my last two. So what I'm going to do here is slip that one onto my right needle temporarily. I'm going to twist this one again. Again, it doesn't matter which way you twist it so much. And then I'm actually going to put that slip stitch back to my left needle, I'm going to slip, slip and knit through the back. So it's an SSK. Okay. And then you would continue knitting in the round to finish your thumb. But already that has tightened up those gaps there. Okay. And every time you knit around on your thumb, when you get to those transition points, you would make sure you pull that up really snugly. Okay. And that's going to really help close that gap. So I hope that makes sense. It's that rung that lies between the right hand needle and the stitches for the thumb gusset. You pick that up, pop it on the needle, do the same at the other end, and then when you come to knit them, you knit it with its neighbour, and you knit it two together for the first one, and then you do an SSK for the last one. Just make sure you remember to twist that ladder rung, if you will, when you put it back on the needle, otherwise you're still going to have a hole. Okay, so you carry on knitting the round to finish the thumb. Make sure you tug the yarn at those transition points. So I'm going to go back to my mitt now, because that's exactly what I've done here. Let's get that out of the way. And you can see, let me put it on my hand, and then you can see it actually fits this time rather than the giant's mitt that we had last week. So that's a really nice, neat thumb closure there. There's no gappiness, there's no hole. And, you know, the other thing I'm going to do in a minute is tell you how to, yeah, let me use the pointer. So there's no gap there. This is a stress point as well, because this is where you move your hand. So if you make that nice and snug, it's not going to go anywhere. And this side as well, it's really nice and snug. Now, that first, where you have the tail end, you're always going to get a slightly bigger hole there. It's always going to be a bit bigger. But you don't have to worry, because when it comes to, and I said this last week, but when it comes to weaving in the end, you're going to have an end there, and you just weave it in and make it really snug. So you can almost tighten up, you can tighten up the stitches there too when you weave it in. It's not going to do any harm at all. You want a bit of strength there so that stitches don't pull away or get stretched when you move your thumb. So you can certainly just weave those ends in as I've done there. You can just see that end there that I've woven around. I basically did a little sort of round the eyelet, round the hole, and then fastened off, and the same here. So don't be afraid to do that. And if you need to go back and do it, you can do that. But doing those little stitches, doing that little simple fix will really make your knitting when you're doing mitts and gloves a lot better. Okay, so that's our mitts. Now, how to fix some other holes in your knitting. So here we have a hole right in a bit of knitting now. Of course, I know what I did there, but let's pretend I don't know what I did there. And I'm aghast that I've done my knitting. I've done several rows, and let's imagine this is, you know, several hundred stitches on the needles, or I've done several rows and now I've found a hole. What do I do? Well, I could, of course, unpick it all, but if I really, you know, I probably don't want to do that. If it's just run one row back, I can just probably drop the yarn over and ease the extra yarn in either side. But if it's several rows down like this one is, I'm not going to be able to ease all that extra into the sides, because there is quite a lot of extra yarn once you've done that yarn over. And let me show you what I mean. So what I would do here, I'm going to go up to where the stitch that I've made the yarn over, the lines above it. So I'm going to drop that stitch, and then you'll see what I mean by a lot of excess too. I'm going to drop that. It's not going to go anywhere once it gets there. But if I've got to pull, you know, all this extra in either side of this for several rows, it's not going to work, and it's going to be messy. It's going to be very loose, and you're not going to like that. I wouldn't like it. So here's what we're going to do. Now, I would normally do this with a crochet hook. I don't have one to hand today because those are all back in my studio. But what I will do, even without the aid of a safety net or even a crochet hook, I'm going in with another needle. And this is it's as well to know this, because you might not have a crochet hook handy. But you would have a needle. So this is what to do. So you want to find that base point there. So you're going to find this is the stitch. We don't want to start there because we're going to start with a hole again. So this is the stitch. This is the row before we did the yarn over, okay? So this is a bit fiddly because I would do it with a hook, but I'm going to go in from the top. I'm going to pick that up like that and twist it. Okay, it's much easier with a hook, but we can still do it with a needle. Look, point it downwards, twist it. Now I'm going to go up each of these rungs, as it were, and kind of knit them. I'm going to knit them up that vertical. And you can do this for as many rows as you need to. Okay. So it is much easier with a hook, but it's still very doable with a needle. Okay, so there we are. That's back on the needle. And in all honesty, are you going to notice that? You could always kind of tighten that up a little, but it's much better than a hole. Now, if you think it's going to affect your stitch count, then you could decrease somewhere where it won't be noticed. But if you were doing a blanket, or if it's a sock, or if it's somewhere you can hide it, it's not going to notice. It just looks, if you really look carefully, it's going to look like a left-leaning increase, which is sort of what it is. But you're never going to see that otherwise. And again, you could just, if it really bothers you, you can just ease that along a little bit. And by the time you've finished sort of pulling that about and blocking it, you'll never know that was there. Okay? So that's a really good tip for that miscellaneous hole that you find. So, what if you've already bound off your work and you see a hole, and you see the hole then? So here I am with my sample. I've bound off, and my goodness, there's my hole. Again, I've got lots of stitches on my needles, and I've done many rows, and now I see the hole. What am I going to do there? Well, okay, I don't really want to have to unpick my bound off edge. So here's what we do. And I'm going to show you actually. No, I was going to show you with a contrast yarn. I'm not going to. I'm going to show you with the matching yarn so that you can really see how well it blends in. So again, the trusty tapestry needle, I'm going to thread it with my rusty colour yarn. Okay, so this is my cast on edge. This is my cast off edge. And I'm going to turn this round. What I'm looking for here is, you can see here I've got a row of, a column if you like, of V's going up, but I haven't here. But I'm going to make one, and this is going to blend in. So I get my yarn, I get my tapestry needle, I'm going to go in here. So I go in, I'll take that out so you can see again. I go in this rung. So this would be actually the yarn over. Remember, we've turned it round. That would be the yarn over. This is my cast on edge. I'm turning it round so it's upside down because I want to be able to see this row, this vertical row of V's, leading up from my hole there. So now I'm going in from the back, just under that rung there. And now I'm going to go above the hole, replicate that, my V, and I'm going to come back into the hole that I just went out of. Okay. Now, that's all you need to do. You could snug that up, you would weave those ends in, just give it a pull about, just make sure that's, I'm just going to knot that so it doesn't open up every time I pull it, but you would obviously weave the ends in, or what you want to do. And then you can fiddle about with that a bit if you need to. again, if that's in the depth of your knitting or in the sides of your knitting, you're never, by the time you've woven that end in, you're never going to know that that was there. So super easy fix there for if you have a hole. One other thing I'm going to show you, because we have got time, and I'm going to use the same sample piece. So what if you had snagged one of the stitches? What if you had caught one of the stitches and you'd actually got a hole and the thread had broken? I'm going to create that by snipping a little hole there. Okay, so my goodness me, I've snipped a hole. I don't want that. That's horrible. I don't want that there. And you know, I think I should have, I'm going to do it again further up. I need a bit more room there, so ignore that. I'm going to go a bit further up because I want you to see how I'm going to do this. So that's my snagged hole. Oh, catastrophe. Okay, doesn't need to be a catastrophe. What I would do here, and you can't do it if it's lots of rows, you can do it if it's one basically. So I need to find out, I need to really find out where the sort of hole has occurred. So it's here. Then I would kind of go along, and I'm going to give myself a sort of a bit of a run up to it because I want to be, I'm going to do what they call, we've done duplicate stitch before. I just need to see where I'm going here. Right, I've got it. Okay, so I'd give myself a bit of a run up. And I am going to do this in a contrast set so you can really see it. So we've done duplicate stitch before, and you would do duplicate stitch if you had got, if you want to add some stitches, if you want to embellish it in some way. You're literally duplicating the knitted stitch. It's very good for doing sort of lines in plaid if you want to do that, and that's how we did it before. So you're going, I'm going to keep these fairly loose for the moment so you can see. I'm replicating, no, I've come in too low there, sorry. That's what you've got to be careful of, not to come in too low. Okay, I need to come in, I did the mistake that we all do to start, I've went in that one, I need to go this one. So you're missing almost a whole stitch. This is where I've come in, I'm missing that one, I'm coming in up there. So this is duplicate stitch, sorry, hit the camera there. I'm coming in over here. And when it gets to the point of my hole, it sort of becomes Swiss darning. I'd be very careful pulling that up when I get there, but I'm not going to do it at the moment. So this is my hole. So this is where the hole is. So I'm going to capture that stitch there. Perfect. And then I'm going to go in here and capture that one. And then so on and so on. And I wouldn't obviously necessarily, yeah, I would probably just do another couple of stitches either side. And then I can go about the business of tightening it up if I need to. I'm not going to make it too tight over the hole. It's got to be the same sort of tension as the knitting. But that is how you would fix a hole. And as you can see from the back, there's the bits of the hole there. That's my stitches above and below. Okay. So if you actually had a hole, and of course, if you did that in the matching colour to your knitting, you're never going to see that because you're completely replicating the stitches. And that would benefit for a bit more tightening up, but you get the idea. So duplicate stitch, it's the same stitch, it just sort of changes its name when you're actually going over the knitted stitch and when you're going over a hole. When you're going over a cap, it's called Swiss darning. Okay. So do try those. Don't make holes in your garments, but do try it. So some little easy fixes for holes in your knitting. I'm going to ask the camera to come back to me. I hope you found that useful. I love it when you tell me things that I had some lovely comments last week from people that said, oh, I just got up to making my mittens, and thank you for the thumb gusset tutorial. So do tell me what you'd like me to do as an episode. You know, I try and pick things that I think are useful for knitters, especially if you're progressing in your knitting. But if there's a particular topic you'd like me to cover, please let me know. I'll do it in a future episode. Always happy to have your comments on the Facebook page or in the thread below this one. So don't forget, our friends at marymaxim.com are offering a 20% discount of the highest priced item for anything in your cart. But you must put in the promo code Cheryl to get that 20%. So take a look at their website. If there's anything you want to buy, make sure you put the promo code in Cheryl, and then you'll get 20% off that highest price item. And as always, this episode and all others are uploaded to the Knitter Matters Facebook page. They're also uploaded to our YouTube channel. There's an entire playlist there, so you can see all the episodes and all their titles. So if you subscribe to YouTube, then you'll be notified as soon as a new one is uploaded. So do please do that. And if you are searching for the replay of this one, it's season 2, episode 11. So thank you again for watching. Join us next week. It's always a pleasure to have you. Join us next week at 7 p.m. Eastern. And in the meantime, stay well, stay calm, and stay knitting. And bye for now.